Hello, this is Court Watch with Alex Swoyer, and I'm excited to bring you the latest episode of my podcast, where I am joined by Peter Navarro, former director of the White House National Trade Council for President Donald Trump. He was just released from prison after serving 4 months for being convicted of defying a congressional subpoena. He was subpoenaed by the January 6th committee along with Trump ally Steve Bannon, who is currently behind bars for the same conviction. He's got a new book out this month discussing 2024 policy, and detailed his thoughts as he went to prison in his author's note in The New MAGA Deal, published just last week.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. I first wanted to ask you about your new book, The New MAGA Deal, out this month, and an author's note that I noticed that you took time to jot down some of your thoughts before you went to prison for not complying with the January 6th committee's subpoena. And I know you cited executive privilege and your case is on appeal, but in that note, you said something about you and President Trump could wind up behind bars. I wanted to ask you, do you think that's what Democrats have planned ahead of November? Do you think that he will also end up behind bars?
So let's start with the book, and I'll get to that question. It's called The New MAGA Deal. The subtitle is kind of fun. It's the unofficial deplorables guide to the Trump 2024 platform. I wrote The New MAGA Deal, started it shortly after the 2022 congressional election, which was disappointing. Let's be honest about that. We were expecting a red tide, never happened. And I think the reason was twofold. I don't think we have clearly articulated the important policy differences between us here in Trump's America and those folks out there in radical left-wing America. And also, we weren't able to deflect what was a vicious attack on the MAGA movement. Mm-hmm. If you remember the red wedding speech, I like to call it, that Joe Biden gave, attacking us as something other than mainstream, this troubled me greatly, because to understand what MAGA represents, what Donald Trump represents, how he's transformed the Republican Party into the party of Main Street, is to understand that MAGA is as sensible as it could be. And so I wrote The New MAGA Deal. The website's newmagadeal.com. It's the publishing house of Don Jr. And the book does two things. First, it's 100 actions in 100 days. When Donald Trump wins in November, which I hope he does, because if we lose this election, we lose this country. The day after that election, between that day and Inauguration Day, he's going to be writing over 100 executive orders to implement a good portion of the Trump agenda. 100 actions in 100 days on the economy, border security, relations with China, and everything down to the cultural issues of the transgender destruction of women's sports. It's all there. newmagadeal.com. Check out the book. But the most important thing about this book is how it explains what MAGA principles are. I go back to my time in 2016 with the president on the campaign trail. I'm only one of 3 people that was in the White House who was with him all the way from that campaign to the end. And people need to understand, during the 2016 campaign, there were 17 candidates, 16 other Republicans. And those 16 other Republicans believed in Republican principles, just as Donald Trump does, related to things like tax cuts or lower regulation or the need for strategic energy dominance. But what set Donald Trump apart was the MAGA portion of his platform. And in the New MAGA Deal book, I describe an iron triangle of MAGA principles. At the top of that triangle, you have the strong manufacturing and defense industrial base that you bring about through Trump policies like tariffs and the renegotiation of trade deals and Buy American, Hire American. That's at the top. That's how you get Black, brown, blue Americans prosperous.
I worked for Steve Bannon at the time. I was working for Breitbart, and I was traveling, and that was what you're hitting on did very well when I was on the campaign trail in Michigan, Wisconsin.
Steve had, when we were in the White House, he had this big board, this big whiteboard with all the stuff we were going to do. And it's grouped conceptually around the strong manufacturing base. The second part, of course, is the border, closing the border, a secure border. You do that for economic reasons, so you don't flood our markets or labor markets with illiterate illegal aliens, but you do it for national security reasons, so you don't let the Islamic terrorists and the Chinese spies in. And then the third part of the triangle is the end of the endless wars. You don't go you don't pull a George Bush or a Barack Obama with wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Endless wars drain our treasure. And so you understand this. We're talking the same language here, but broadly, the American people, when they hear MAGA now, it's like the radical Democrats, Biden, Harris, and all of those, they want to paint us as something other than mainstream. We're mainstream. Yeah. We're America. It's apple pie. It's sensible. And so the new MAGA Deal book is really dedicated to helping Americans understand what MAGA stand for, and then understanding the 100 actions in 100 days.
What's the first action?
Well, it's got to be securing the border. You'll see, and that entails a ton more than a single action. But when we did it before, and I was in the Oval Office when the president came up with the idea, we were having trouble with the Obama judges thwarting every opportunity we were trying to do to secure the border. And finally, the boss says, how about this? How about if we propose tariffs on Mexico unless they adopt what's called the Safe Third Nation agreements? With those agreements, you keep the illegals on their side of the border. And then the boss says to me, can we do that? I look at Pat Cipollone, the White House legal counsel, and said, yes, sir, we can under national security rules. Cipollone says, yeah, we can. So he makes the threat, credible threat. He was going to do it. 24 hours. Within 24 hours, the Mexicans have the safe third. And then we parlayed that into safe thirds in the Northern Triangle countries, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. And the crisis was solved. Right. So we'll get that done. The mass deportations the whole infrastructure to get that done will be put into place. And then you got to deal with the fentanyl issues, the cartel issues, and all of that. So the border security thing, 100 actions in 100 days, that's going to have at least a dozen, because you got to track that one on all sorts of. And then you got the economy that you got to deal with, the inflation that's going to have to do with bringing our supply chains home, some of the national security issues. President said outright he's not going to let transgenders destroy women's sports. He's going to free the J6 prisoners and so on. So there's just a lot of things that can be done, and a lot of that will be done by executive orders written between election day after and inauguration day. But we got to win this race. And it's really important that we don't let them attack us as extremists when they are the ultra extremists. I mean, Harris is the most liberal senator when she was there. She was the tiebreaker in the Senate as vice president, responsible for all of that fiscal irresponsibility. She turned her tail on the border. And we got to hold them accountable as we protect our own base and basically stop them from attacking us in the ways they are.
Well, you talk about attacks, talk about the courts. You mentioned the reference to an Obama judge. I cover the Supreme Court. I cover legal affairs. Yeah. And it seems like whenever there's some sort of case that touches on politics, I can almost look at the judge and see who appointed that judge to kind of know the outcome of the case before anything even gets started. We know what happened to you. We see what's going on with the upcoming sentencing of Donald Trump in New York. What is the system too far gone? What do you make of the judicial
Yeah,
system?
it's pretty far gone. And let me, since you're an expert in this, one of the lines I had in my speech was, "I went to prison, so you won't have to." And what I meant by that is that if you look at how I wound up in prison, it basically makes the case why we have to win not just the White House, but we've got to take back the Senate and build our majority in the House of Representatives. My other line that led into that was, if we don't control our government, their government will control us. If we don't control all three branches of our government, legislative, executive, judicial, their government will put some of us, like me and Steve Bannon, in prison, try to put President Trump in prison, and their government will control the rest of us. And so what I did in that speech, and what I can do for you now, is explain how it took Democrat control of all three branches of government to put me in prison for simply doing my duty in defense of the Constitution. And it was the House and Pelosi controlling that House, a Democrat majority on a straight party line, held me in contempt for refusing to testify before a J6 witch hunt, which had only one purpose, and you know what it was: to stop Donald Trump from being the next president. It took a Democrat attorney general in the executive branch, and Merrick Garland, to indict and prosecute me for a alleged crime that the Department of Justice has said for more than 50 years isn't a crime at all. It was my duty to tell Congress to go pound sand when they sent me that subpoena. And then the judges here, this is where your expertise comes in. It's like, just as Juan Marchand did to Trump in Manhattan, my judge, this guy named Amit Mehta in the D.C. District.
Appointed by Obama.
Yeah, appointed by Obama. Wife works at the biggest lobbying and campaign contribution law firm in D.C. It's very much Mehta Inc. in terms of buying a seat on the bench, and he's got aspirations of being the first Indian American on the Supreme Court. He wants to use me as his stepping stone and strip me of every single defense before I even got to trial. And then it was a DC jury drawn from a jury pool, basically drawn from a voter registration, where 95% of the people voted for Biden.
I was going to say like 4% were Republican voters, right? So.
Yeah, and like if you only got 5% of Republicans in the jury pool, the prosecution had enough preemptive challenges to just get rid of anybody. To be honest, there wasn't a single person in the voir dire on the jury. There was one African-American male that seemed like he wasn't a Trump person or whatever. He seemed like he would be fair, and they got rid of him first. He was like gone. Now, the other thing which you might find interesting, maybe you want to look into this a little bit. One of the evil things that Amit Mehta did is truly evil. This man is truly evil. He refused to release me pending appeal. Mm-hmm. When in fact, I have a case where there's no question there are what's called substantial issues related to executive privilege. I mean, I'm the first senior White House advisor ever charged with this crime. This is the first time executive privilege has ever been implicated in a contempt of Congress charge. Congress didn't meet its burden of seeking to negotiate my testimony by asking the president to waive the privilege. And the judge himself came up with a, let us call a novel interpretation of the law in terms of denying that the president had properly invoked privilege. It's not, right. I mean, there's all these issues. And then so he sends me to prison. I appeal that. And here's what gets interesting. Write this one down. There's two judges. There's Patricia Millett and Cornelia Nina Pillard. Patricia Millette, Cornelia Pillard. Okay, they're on the appeals court in the
The
DC
DC
circuit.
circuit, right.
There's 11 Democrats, 5 Republicans. Now, I've had, I think, 4 times I've been up on the appeals case to court with 3 panel judges, right? And Steve had 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the point is that everybody thinks that these panels are constructed randomly. Do you think that?
Well, they say they're drawn from that pool. I don't know how it works.
See, that's a total lie. And the law doesn't even require them to do that. I had either Millette or Pillard on every single one of my panels.
Right.
Steve did as well. And the one that wound up sending me to prison had both of them on that. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, that's obscene. That is obscene. And if you look at them, it's the same model as MAGA. They got spouses that are intimately involved in the DC swamp, in political activity, who are virulently anti-Trump. And they're the ones who set the tone. They're the ones who ruled in Steve's appeal. They're the ones who sent me to prison.
We see
how do you in America trust a judicial system that's that corrupt?
Yeah. It's
something deck. I went to prison for 4 months before I could even have my appeal be sent to the appeals court. It was like, boom, go to prison. It's obscene what they did.
Yeah, and they can't, like, your case is still working its way through. Say you come out on top.
It started working its way.
Exactly. And so then you've already served your time. Right. So it's something I hear a lot from readers too. You're talking about certain, like, why didn't this judge recuse, certain questions of conflicts of interests.
Yeah.
We heard a lot about that with Trump's case in New York too. And I was going to ask you, do you see yourself possibly back in a second Trump administration?
No, I don't. I never think like that. I was never looking for a job in 2016. My focus now is on the book, New MAGA Deal, newmagadeal.com. Please go and check this out at the website, newmagadeal.com. It's my best shot at helping the president get elected. 100 actions in 100 days, plus a full-throated defense of MAGA as a mainstream American movement. And that's all my focus is. I don't think about anything past November. It's dangerous to do so. Yeah. This is going to be a tough race. I was still in prison when I was watching everybody get overconfident after that debate and this, that, and the other thing. At the end of the day, this comes down to 5 states. 5 states. That's it. That election isn't a national election. It's a 5-state election. And I think we'll have some chance of bringing some other states in and play, like Minnesota. Minnesota's interesting. There's the Iron Range there, which has turned Trump's way. And I think a lot of people in this country are disgusted with the woke policies of Kamala Harris in terms of getting rid of police forces and things like that. But at the end of the day, we got to get Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia and Arizona were important. I think North Carolina will be really, really interesting as a state. And I think J.D. Vance really was a great choice because he gives us our best chance, particularly in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, places like North Carolina, where manufacturing has been hammered by the communist Chinese.
Yeah.
So we need to stay focused here. If we lose this election, we lose this country. It's that simple.
You said you tracked the debate when you were in prison. What about, you were also in prison when the assassination attempt happened. What was your reaction to that? How did you hear about it? What was that environment like? It was days before I believe you were released.
Prison's no country for old men. I was in a prison that barbed wire, lockdowns, just terrible food, no medicine really to speak of. It's prison. It's prison. But the worst day I had in prison was the day the president almost lost his life. And I was sitting in the combination TV, ping pong, email room, and I'm working on my speech on the computer. I look up, and the first thing I see is a rally in Bucks County. I say, good, he's in Pennsylvania, he needs to be there. And then I look at the thing and I go, you know what? I don't like this. This friggin' bandbox of a venue. Why in the background is this big stand of trees, which is like sniper heaven? Mm-hmm. And then they pan around, they're showing the venue. I'm going, wait a minute, why are all these rooftops around here? It's like, I didn't like it at all, but it was like, okay, I go back to work, and like 20 minutes later, I look up, and that's when the assassination attempt starts. And I see this, and then I see blood. The sound's off because in prison, you they don't play the TVs. You got to have a headset tuned to the tuner and stuff like that. Just watching this, I just felt helpless. And then after the fact, you learn that they knew about this active threat, like 15, 20 minutes beforehand.
Right.
And then I'm thinking of all, I never thought the Secret Service was hostile to the president, but I knew the FBI and CIA was. And now we're learning that there's portions of the Secret Service that we have to worry about. It seems to me, by Occam's razor, right? The simplest explanation is the most probable, right? It's like I used that back in April of 2020 to say that the virus came from the lab in China, right? Mm-hmm. I got just excoriated for that.
Right. And people online got censored.
Yeah, of course it did. Yeah. Of course it did. And so I'm looking at this. It's like, how do you conclude anything other than this, than somebody, I don't know if it was like more than one person or the conspiracy or whatever, or just somebody who didn't like Trump in the Secret Service who decided, you know what, I'm just going to let this unfold and I'll take the shot after he takes his shots.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people that guy got off 8 shots and then the Secret Service took him out.
Yeah.
When they knew he was up
there. Yeah. I know there's hearings ongoing right now. Jim Jordan's trying to get answers, and what you pose is some of the same what we're hearing from Republican lawmakers from the Secret Service.
That's another reason why we need to get control of all 3 branches of government. You know, that's my message. It's like, you know, I went to prison, so you won't have to. And I'm showing people that all 3 branches of government under Democrat control have nefarious ends. And so if the president wins the White House, we get back the Senate and we build a strong majority, you can bet that we'll get to the bottom of this stuff. But other than that, they're going to bury it. Mm-hmm. And they're going to try to say it was incompetence. Cheeto resigned. She's a sacrificial lamb. But come on. 15 to 20 minutes beforehand. They know there's an active
supposed to be the best,
see this guy on the roof. And are you telling me that information is not getting relayed up the chain? I know too much about government and how the Secret Service works and how these rallies go to believe any of that.
Mm-hmm. It's very concerning.
It's not, that dog don't hunt.
Right.
It just doesn't hunt.
Yeah. And it's the lack of transparency 2 weeks later, too, any answers at all, that also helps breed.
I want every one of those Secret Service agents under a lie detector. I want to ask them tough questions and see what happens. Mm-hmm. And I'll bet you they won't do it.
I'm sure that their supervisors wouldn't want them to do that, right?
Well, it's you change administrations. You call an investigation, and what was in your head? I want to know the guy who shot the guy. What took you so long? You can see in the video, his head goes up, he looks, his head comes back down. It's like, come on, dude. It's like
Right.
you're looking through the best scope in the world. You knew that wasn't one of ours.
Yeah.
So it had to be a bogey. You take him out then. That's what you're trained to do. It's what you're trained to do, dude.
Yeah, exactly. I know.
This guy's not a hero for killing that guy.
It might take a change of administration to get some more clarity on the delay and why, even when you knew there was a threat out there, you let the president go out and speak.
That was off 8 shots.
Right.
We found shell casings, from what I'm told, up there.
Mm-hmm.
8 shell casings. How does he do that?
Right. Well, I really appreciate your time. I know you needed to be out
Yes, thank you.
by a certain time. So I just want to say I appreciate you taking time to discuss your new book, The New MAGA Deal. I'll make sure I tweet it out so everyone can order.
Okay.
Thanks again. I enjoyed our chat.
All right. You take care of yourself, and let's win in November.
Thanks for tuning in to the latest episode of Court Watch. If you have not subscribed yet to this podcast, please do so, and also feel free to email me interesting questions or topics you want explored about the legal reporting world. I'll do my best to answer them during each episode. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to hearing from you all soon. Listen to my podcast Court Watch at WashingtonTimes.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.